After almost 40 years, the remains of a body found in Twinsburg, Ohio have been identified as Frankie Little Jr., a musician and songwriter who briefly played with the O'Jays. Little's remains were found in February 1982. They were in a garbage bag behind a business in Twinsburg, and the circumstances surrounding his death are still unknown. At the time the remains were found, the death was said to be undetermined, but now it is being ruled a homicide. Investigators used DNA and public genealogical databases to finally identify Little after decades of not being able to do so. Little's time with the O'Jays was brief. He joined the group as a guitarist and songwriter in the mid-60s, and he worked with lead vocalist and co-founder Eddie Lebert on a handful of songs, including the 1964's Do the Jerk, 1966's Pretty Words, and 1967's Oh How You Hurt Me. During the course of the reopened investigation into Little's remains, Twinsburg detective Eric Hendershot did confirm Little's involvement with the O'Jays with co-founder Walter Williams. The band said earlier in a statement, quote, "Frankie was a guitarist and a songwriter in the very early O'Jays. He came with us when we first ventured out of Cleveland and traveled to Los Angeles. But he was also in love with a woman in Cleveland that he missed so much that he would soon return back to Cleveland after a short amount of time. That was in the mid-1960s, and we had not heard from him after then. Although this sounds like a tragic ending, we wish his family and friends closure to what appears to be a very sad story." Little's remains were first discovered when employees at an old machine shop discovered a skull while dumping shavings in the woods behind a shop. A search of the property uncovered the rest of the remains, which still didn't compromise a complete set. These were in a garbage bag, and while authorities were able to determine some potential details about the victim, there was nothing to help them confirm an identity. Forensic anthropologists also determined that the remains had been sitting around for 2 to 4 years before their discovery. The initial investigation didn't go far and the case went cold until Sergeant Gregg reopened it in 2009. But efforts to plug the man's DNA into various databases, including the FBI's, returned no hits, and attempts to create a model for the man's face based on the skull found also proved fruitless. In 2018, Hendershot picked up the case, and he was hopeful that advances in DNA tech and databases, which had been used successfully in high-profile investigations like the one into the Golden State Killer, would finally lead to a positive identification. Hendershot began working with the DNA Doe Project. This is a non-profit organization that helps identify John and Jane Does with genetic genealogy. The following year, Little's DNA profile was compared with those in public genealogy databases, which helped investigators build a family tree, leading them to the surname of Little and a handful of possible options. It was at that point that Hendershot called Margaret O'Sullivan, a cousin of Little's, who confirmed that she had had a cousin who had gone missing and that her cousin had a brother who was still living in Georgia. Finally, after obtaining a DNA sample from Little's brother, Little's identity was officially known. Margaret said, "This is amazing. We're glad that we have closure now. We now know that he is deceased." Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, this is Unjustified Crimes Breaking News.
Little, born in 1943, was raised in Cleveland, served in the Army for 2 years with a deployment to Vietnam. He went on to join the OJs sometime in the 60s, but died before the group reached success in the early 70s. But Little's musical contributions live on. The question now is, what happened to Frankie Little Jr.? Who killed him? And will we ever know all these decades later? Now, Frank had a daughter who passed away in 2012, but his brother told police that he also has a son, but his brother doesn't know the son's name. And not much is known about Frankie's death other than he likely died from a head wound. Now, his brother did allude to police that he might have been involved in some sort of criminal activity. So Twinsburg police, they're working this homicide like it's new.